1963, I'm 9 years old, and my father was a student at the University of Georgia. Didn't they win this year, the Bulldogs? Nobody follows football, okay. And he takes the family to Atlanta, and he takes us to the Atlanta Cyclorama. Now remember, he's a student, but he bought me one of the the programs from, and this is not it. The reason this is not it is because I went through the one he bought me so often that it disintegrated because I just loved it. I loved the cyclorama, and so I had to get a replacement, online, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And so this is the Battle of Atlanta Cyclorama from the second cyclorama, and I'm going to be talking about the history of that. But that's how I got interested in cycloramas, and then I decided I wanted to kind of look it up, and it became a story that was way more complicated than I thought, and I hope I can get through this rather quickly. So 1788, Robert Barker creates the first cyclorama of Edinburgh, Scotland, and you can see it on the bottom. And the reason I put that in there is because it shows you some of the complication of creating a picture in the round. Because of course it can't be painted normally, it's got to be painted so that it makes sense when it's a circle. Do you understand what I'm saying? Plus, they bowed out. So it's an incredible, just artistic achievement to make these paintings. So, the other problem is that the term panorama is also used, and the cyclorama can refer to the painting and the building in which it's exhibited, so that causes problems that I'm going to be talking about later. So this is a panorama, and here's the booklet for that at Detroit. It's at a museum in Detroit. So you can see the creator who made this machine to turn it. You see it? Yeah, you see how that works. It's pretty simple. Or sometimes it went from side to side, and they used those as backdrops for plays. Okay? And in fact, in one of the plays, they did the chariot race at Ben-Hur by using a panorama behind an actual horse, that wasn't running, but the background was. Okay, so those are panoramas, the one that moved, as far as I'm saying, and the cyclorama is the one that doesn't move. Okay, so there we go. So Filippo then decides to do the Siege of Paris. And they built a separate building, as you can see up on the left. So that becomes a cyclorama building. And then the painting that there, you can see a drawing of the creation of the painting in the upper right-hand corner. So this is the Siege of Paris. So when my wonderful wife Mecca and I go to Paris, of course, I say, we have to go see where the Siege of Paris center was. So of course there is a viewpoint right there, and the cyclorama then depicts the area around here. So here's the fort on Mount Valerian, and we walked up there, and it really is a mountain. Oh my God. I'm not in the best of shape, and I had to stop a couple times on the way up. It was really steep, but I wanted to be in the center of where that cyclorama point of view had been taken from. And we get up there, and the fort is closed. It's an actual military base, and they won't let you in. But anyway, we were there. And I thought, okay, I'll talk about it in my talk anyway. So, George Willoughby goes to see the Siege of Paris. And it is so successful, dollar signs go off, and he says, oh boy, I'm going to do this in the United States. And of course, we're going to do what we just talked about. We're going to do Gettysburg, of course. What else, right? And so he hires the son to paint Gettysburg. Now, of course, it was, it's not just one person. It's a whole bunch of people. And, one person does horses, one person does bodies, one person does clouds, one person, that's how they did these things. So anyway, he hires Paul Filippo, Henry's son, to do Gettysburg. And there is Paul standing on a ladder, and right next to him, right there, he includes himself in the painting. And we're going to talk about, those kind of things that happen in the paintings in a little bit. No one is quite sure where this painting was done, which surprises me, the Paris or Brussels. But anyway, so it comes to Chicago. Now, this is before motion pictures, so this is the big deal. This is where people are going. And this is an amazing shot down here on the left. There were, at one time, 5 cycloramas in Chicago. They had their own buildings. So you can see the one on the left is, the one on the right is the Battle of Gettysburg, and the one on the left is Jerusalem at the time of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And people would just flock to these things, and they were making major amounts of money. So this is 1883. 50 years later, there is the Battle of Gettysburg, again back in Chicago for the Chicago World's Fair. Right there. And so this was a big deal. And people were making tons of money. And so, of course, everybody wants in on the action. Going the wrong way. And so, Willoughby, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Willoughby says, I'm making so much money in Chicago, I'm going to, do this in a lot of different places. So he hires people to make copies. And so one goes to Boston, and this is one, so here's the, oh, my battery probably just went dead, but that's okay. In the left, of course, you can figure this out, that's the original, but it's the Cyclorama building is still there. So that's down in the lower right-hand corner in Boston. And of course, just 2 blocks away was another cyclorama of the Battle of Bunker Hill. So people, it was like going to movies, what are you going to do? And from the get-go, and this is something that surprised me, they had the 3D stuff in the foreground. So if you've ever been to the cyclorama, like there's cannon barrels and stuff in front of the painting, and we'll see some examples of that. But in Boston, someone broke into the cyclorama, and the police went in and tried to arrest some of the mannequins. So this is how realistic they were. Oh, and by the way, Civil War generals came. You can see Logan. And then, of course, people who spoke at the cycloramas became famous. And they went around the country doing talks because they had done talks at the cycloramas, which were so popular. So now it becomes like a competition. So there's another copy made for Philadelphia. And you can see the ad, it says, so many people came to Boston. Philadelphia is a better city. You can get more people. Well, of course they want more people. They're making more money. And so there's a 3rd copy, a 4th copy in Brooklyn. So there's the picture of the cyclorama building from Brooklyn. And down below is the map. Can you see the courthouse? And then right below is the circle. That's the cyclorama building. Now, these copies were not all the same. So on the top is this is the Philadelphia version with Meade's headquarters. And then on the bottom right, I'm sorry, it's a little fuzzy, is the Brooklyn version of Meade's headquarters. So they're not all exactly alike. And part of the reason is because they got feedback from veterans. Veterans would go and they'd say, no, that's not right. So one of the most famous of that's not right is Armistead, who originally was put on a horse, but he wasn't on a horse, and so then they took him off the horse. So on the right you can see Armistead, with the hat at the end of the sword, which supposedly the sword pierced the hat, and actually the hat was down at the bottom, but anyway. There was so much money. In the first 10 years, stockholders were paid $450,000. And I got to remember, this is in the 1890s. This is just an amazing amount of money. Willoughby was able to build the house on the right. Okay, so this is the guy that had all these copies made. He built the house on the right, which is now the headquarters of the Mayflower Society. The House of Willoughby built because of these cycloramas. The other cool thing, just because, I'm a literary nut, Ralph Waldo Emerson was married in the house, but if that doesn't excite you, that's okay. So, cycloramas spread around the country. Everybody knew it was going to happen. There was so much money. Every city wanted one. So you can see the article on the left. Pretty soon, no large town will be complete without a cyclorama. And it pretty much was true. I mean, they went everywhere. So we have the Pittsburgh Cyclorama. We have the San Francisco Cyclorama, which is showing the Battle of Waterloo. And then after the Battle of Waterloo, the Battle of Vicksburg was going to move in. So this was this maybe period of 20 years where they were very popular. Kansas City Cyclorama, Los Angeles Cyclorama, Ottawa, Kansas Cyclorama, and of course New York had several of them, and Allegheny City, Pennsylvania, the Syracuse. I mean, this is why it became really complicated for me to follow the story, and I just kind of said, there's no way you can kind of follow these around. Cincinnati Cyclorama, you can see it in the map on the lower right-hand corner. The Battle of Sedan, which of course was a European battle, was another cyclorama that was touring the country. And this is one of my favorite. So this is the Indianapolis Cyclorama, right by the State House there. And so I wanted to do some research on the cyclorama in Sioux City, Iowa. So I called the Historical Society down there, and I said, I know that there's a picture in this particular publication. Do you know if you have that publication? And the guy said, you mean the buildings where they did bicycle races? I go, no, that's a velodrome. I'm talking about a cyclorama, which probably looks like a velodrome, but it's not. But then the irony is that somebody really thought it was a velodrome, rode their bicycle around it, and died. You can see the article on the left. And so I'm going, well, so people, that wasn't such a crazy thing to say about bicycle racing, so people tried it. And so here's, the cyclorama in. So I'm referring, of course, to the buildings and the paintings. So here's the cyclorama building at Indianapolis. Here's kind of a cool one. It was put in the middle of a block. You can see, the map on the left, and then the building, on the right. So this is the Cleveland Cyclorama, 1889. This was, when they were the highlight. So, John Gibbon, who was at, what does it say? Vancouver Barracks up in Oregon. And he decides to go to the Gettysburg Cyclorama when it is in Portland. And which you can see a picture of it down in the lower left. It shows the Portland Cyclorama. And he is in the painting. Oh gosh, I can't believe my battery went dead. But you can see him right in the upper right-hand corner on the sorrel with his sword raised. He got shot right after that. So anyway, he is in the cyclorama, and he said, and of course this is great publicity, This is a site you've got to see. You've got to see before you die. So all these veterans, of course, were going to the Cycloramas. Now, one of the veterans was living in Oregon, and he wanted to get married at Gettysburg because it was such a big deal in his life. So he couldn't get out to Gettysburg, so he took his bride-to-be to the Portland Cyclorama and got married there because he said, that was like the second best thing. And these cycloramas were so intense for these veterans that they would go there and they would record things they said, and of course it could be apocryphal, as our previous speaker knows, but they're great stories. And so one of them was with his veteran friends. These guys had fought at Gettysburg, and they're walking around, and he pulls the guy down and says, "Look out, somebody's aiming at us." Another guy said to one of his friends, "Look, as soon as that smoke lifts over there, you'll see where I was on the battlefield." Okay, so this is how intense seeing these cycloramas was for these veterans. One of them went in and said, "I can't stand it. I have to leave the smell of the dead horses." Well, there weren't any dead horses, of course, but, it brought it all back. So, Sioux City. A couple reasons why Sioux City is important to me in this talk. One, I was born in Sioux City, so there we go. But secondly, as I'm reading through the articles about these various cycloramas, it talks about how they were destroyed by tornadoes, partly because they were in temporary wooden buildings, but partly there's another reason that I want to talk about here. So, I read an article that said a particular cyclorama was destroyed in Sioux City, Iowa by a tornado. And in the article they're talking about the painting. So then I'm going back and I'm looking through the newspaper articles, and yes, indeed, there was a storm that says in the lower left-hand corner that it wrecked the cyclorama. But after reading these other articles that were published later, I'm sure it was the building that got wrecked because it had a tarp over the top of it. Basically a round wooden shed with a tarp over the top. That's how they did this later when there wasn't as much money to be made. So anyway, the painting, the cyclorama painting, that several sources said was destroyed in a tornado in Sioux City, Iowa, obviously wasn't destroyed because in August, after the June storm, it says lots of people were still going to see the Battle of Gettysburg. So the painting was still there. It was not destroyed by a tornado. And so now I'm thinking all those articles I read about cycloramas being destroyed by tornadoes just weren't true. So the story is really hard to follow. So here's a picture of the cyclorama building in Sioux City, Iowa. Now you can see very flimsy. And you can understand how if a tornado went through, it would rip off the roof and wreck the cyclorama, but not the painting. On the right, so this is a couple years later, you can see an ad, somebody trying to get people to invest in the cyclorama in Sioux City. So it's still the painting. And, let's buy this thing and take it on a tour. And so the painting still existed. Now, what happened to this, I don't know. But I do know it wasn't destroyed in Sioux City, Iowa by a tornado. It still existed. There were several other Civil War subjects besides Gettysburg. Now, of course, Gettysburg was the most famous for a couple of reasons. Because it still exists, and you can go to Gettysburg and see it, is one. And of course, it was a famous battle, and there's these other cycloramas that we only have pieces of. So this is the Polipotes, another Paris painter, the Battle of Shiloh. This is the only part we have of it. And it's a McCormick Reaper advertisement, and you can see the little red thing in the lower left-hand corner. That's the McCormick Reaper that they stuck into the painting, of course, as an advertisement. And the rest of the painting, we don't know what happened to it. This is the only part we have. Thank God for McCormick Reaper. I think this is another McCormick Reaper ad. And this is the only portion of the Battle of the Monitor and Merrimack cyclorama that we have is this McCormick Reaper ad. So all these cycloramas are touring the country at the same time. So somebody who witnessed the battle of the Virginia versus the Monitor went to see the cyclorama and listened to the speaker. Got so upset because the speaker wasn't saying what actually happened according to the witness, and challenged the speaker. The speaker said, "This is what this article says up here. I wasn't there. I have no idea what I'm talking about. They just gave me this script." So that's what you would get if you would go to see a cyclorama. You'd get somebody reading a script. This is another little kind of, actually very confusing. So there was also a cyclorama of what they called here, this is, I think, a German painter, let's see, the Battle of Missionary Ridge. Okay, so we don't have the whole thing, we just have parts of it. It cost $55,000 to paint, $10,000 to ship from Europe to the United States. This is how much these guys figured they were going to make. They were willing to spend, almost $100,000 to get the paintings here, because then they had to build a building to put them in. Lots of money involved. So this is, you can see, if you've never been to a cyclorama, the painting is in the back, and then the 3D stuff is up front. And they're really pretty cool. And so this is stereographs of the Battle of Missionary Ridge at McFarland Gap. So pretty cool. So you are standing up on a platform looking down at the painting, and they would light it by putting glass in the ceiling. And then some of them had electric lights too. So here's where the confusion comes in. This is the Battle of Chattanooga. So very similar to Missionary Ridge, but not Missionary Ridge. So there was another one out there touring called the Battle of Chattanooga. And once again, there are conflicting reports. Some say it opened in Chicago, some say it went to San Francisco and disappeared, some say it went to Nashville and was destroyed by a tornado. They were all destroyed by tornadoes, which is possible. So this is the Battle of Vicksburg, and the only thing I could find was this Japanese pamphlet with the various, like it's like this, okay, with the various panels. And so they did this in 1884, a couple French artists, and politically you could do things with these panoramas to promote a certain view. So apparently the Vicksburg panorama was pro-Grant, anti-McClellan, because Grant is running for president. Now, no one has explained what that meant to me, but there's some other examples that I'll share with you. But supposedly this was pro-Grant, traveling the country. And eventually goes to Japan in 1890 and disappears. This is some studies for the Second Battle of Manassas, another Pole. And it opened in Washington, D.C., so you can see the cyclorama building with the Washington Monument in the background. So these buildings they cropped up like mushrooms all over the country. I mean, they look like giant mushrooms. So, Battle of Atlanta, the one that, of course, got me started on all this, painted in Milwaukee by William Warner, or the direction of William Warner, because, of course, there were teams. And it made a stop in Detroit and then Minneapolis. It's the Battle of Atlanta cyclorama. And of course, on the left is McPherson. This is how much money Warner made. So after this painting went on tour, he built this house in California with a winery around it. So there he is with his car in front of his house. There was just a lot of money to be made. So, it came to Minneapolis. So here's a postcard of Minneapolis. In the lower left-hand corner is the roof of the cyclorama building. And you can see where that cupola is probably where the light came in to shine, on the painting. That's how they lit them up. And the article, of course, is just saying, Minneapolis needs a cyclorama. Of course, all the other cities have one, we have to have one. Some of you may have seen this in the Star Tribune. So they found this panoramic picture of the city of Minneapolis, and then somebody noted that in the back, where number 1 is at the top, was the cyclorama building. Which by the time this picture was taken, it was a furniture store. So these buildings were torn down or repurposed. Of course, it's been, torn down now, but when the picture was taken, it had been repurposed. And the story on the right, Minnesota State Fair, you can either go to the cyclorama, the Gettysburg Cyclorama in St. Paul, or the Atlanta cyclorama in Minneapolis when you come to the Minnesota State Fair. There is no picture that I can find of the St. Paul cyclorama. There is this little letter in the Minnesota History Center about an invitation to come and preview the cyclorama in St. Paul. The History Center says it's 1883, but of course it's 1886. I mean, we can see by the newspaper article it's 1886. I pointed that out to the person at the History Center. I'm sure it will not get changed, but that's just the way it goes. It was not 1883. That would have been the earliest cyclorama in the United States. So we know that it was, that Castle, the guy who founded North St. Paul, was the one who financed it, brought it into town, and we know it was on the corner of 6th and St. Peter. So if you look at the map, right to the right of the church, and by the way, Landmark Center, okay? Landmark Center. So right to the right of the church where that empty lot is there, that's where the cyclorama building was. It makes perfect sense. We just need a little bit of a lot where we can put a round building, put a tarp over the top of it, and we've got our cyclorama. Now, this is showing the difference between the early cycloramas and this kind of second round. So in the first round, the cyclorama was the attraction. In this second round, they're building cycloramas where there's another attraction going on, like the Minnesota State Fair. So we're going to take advantage of the Minnesota State Fair to get people there. Now, the interesting part of the St. Paul story is that Fitzhugh Lee comes to look at the cyclorama. So that article in the upper left-hand corner, we know he was here. I mean, it says Fitzhugh Lee was there. And Sherman Marshall had donated, not donated, but loaned the 28th Virginia flag to be hung at the cyclorama as another reason to entice people to come and see the cyclorama. And so Fitzhugh Lee, the governor of Virginia, comes and says, I want that, but they didn't give it to him. Department stores, right? So Donaldson's would hang the cyclorama someplace in the department store. So, here's an ad, come and see the Gettysburg Cyclorama, at the Donaldson's. If it didn't fit, they would just cut pieces out. And, that's what they did. So as I said, cycloramas at first are just, something that people went to. But then, kind of goes downhill a little. So now we're going to take the cycloramas where the crowds are. And so the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, we bring a cyclorama there. Nashville, because there's a Tennessee Centennial Exposition, we bring the cyclorama there. The Cotton States Exposition in Atlanta, we bring a cyclorama there. And these were low quality copies called Buckeyes. So I don't know the Ohio State Buckeyes or a low quality copy, I don't know, but that's what they're called, Buckeyes. Now, some cities had a cyclorama, like Buffalo, and their cyclorama building is still standing. It's been repurposed. But the interesting thing is, so they had a permanent cyclorama building, but in 1901, the Pan American Exposition comes to Buffalo, and so they build another cyclorama building out at the exposition. Because, there's crowds there, so you have people that pay money to come in with these cycloramas. So you can see there's two cyclorama buildings at the Pan American Exposition in the right-hand picture. South Carolina, this is Charleston, had some kind of an interstate exposition, and the Second Battle of Manassas was there. So this is, once again, we don't have the whole painting, we just have a little bit of it. And people started losing money. You can see it cost $1.25 million to run the exposition, and they only got back $313,000. Not good. St. Louis World's Fair, cyclorama there, Second Battle of Manassas. And I have a whole section that we're not going to look at because I just don't have time on cycloramas in other countries. So I'm just going to show you one. New Zealand. So you can see the left-hand side of the picture, the cyclorama building that was showing, I think, the Battle of Gettysburg in New Zealand. It was very popular all over the world. Jamestown's pretty interesting. So the Jamestown Exposition is actually at Hampton Roads, and on the right is Fort Monroe. Kind of in the lower right-hand corner is Fort Monroe, and then across is what's now Norfolk Naval Base, but it was built there because of this exposition from 1907, from the Jamestown Exposition, and Fitzhugh Lee was there promoting it. And so he was drumming up trade, and he died in 1905 before the exposition actually got underway, but he was working for it. The exposition itself didn't do very well, and I think part of the reason was the most popular part was the Battle of the Virginia versus the Monitor, and it opened late. And so the crowds didn't really start coming until the Cyclorama opened up there. So despite 3 million visitors, it was a financial flop, but Teddy Roosevelt and his great white fleet left from there, and it was a real boost to the U.S. Navy, so that worked out for Teddy. Just another article about the Jamestown Exposition. They're having a problem because they have the Battle of Gettysburg, which is a Union victory, and they have the Battle of Second Manassas, which is a Confederate victory, and they want to have a third cyclorama. That's why they picked the Virginia versus the Monitor, and they said it was a draw. I mean, that's how political this was. The Alaskan, so the cyclorama up in Alaska, that held off until 1910 because the cyclorama was down in Jamestown. So, do any of you remember this building? Oh, okay. So in 1912, the son of General O. Howard says, by the 50th anniversary, we have got to get the Battle of Gettysburg to Gettysburg. Now, it's just been in storage, it's been trashed, it's been rained, it's been burned, and by 1913, they built this temporary building to put it in, but it stayed there until 1962. And then it became like a used bookstore. Is it still there? At Gettysburg?
No.
They tore that down? Okay. Because I remember seeing it.
Cyclorama's in the new.
Yeah, no, I know that, but I'm talking about the building. Because it was there before. So apparently they torn this down too. So then they put it in this building from 1962. There were protests when the building was torn down because it was designed by this famous architect, Richard Neutra. And now, of course, the cyclorama is in the new cyclorama building.
It's worth seeing.
I'm sure, absolutely, they're all worth seeing. So people weren't happy about the design particularly, but you know, there we go. This just gives you some, I'm going to, just a couple quick slides, I'll be done, just to give you some idea of the artistry. So, on the left is what was painted. There has been room put for the 3D leg of the thing holding the bucket and the rope. So those have to be added in 3D to the cyclorama painting, and you can see where they've been attached in the middle. Davis, who painted one of the paintings, supposedly was painted over to put in Benjamin Harrison when the painting came to Indianapolis, because Harrison was in a neck-and-neck political race, and he actually lost the popular vote, but won the vote in Indiana, which gave him the presidency. And some people say it was because his picture was put into the cyclorama. I can't prove that, but once again, it's a great story. Rhett Butler went to the Atlanta Cyclorama and said the only problem was that he wasn't in it, and so they put him in it as a mannequin. So the cyclorama was originally in the building on the left, and it was sold to a guy who eventually owned Coca-Cola, and then he sold it to a lumber merchant, George Kress, who donated it to Atlanta and put it in the building in the upper right-hand corner. In the lower right-hand corner, it shows them restoring the Battle of Atlanta. Now you can see they're made to bulge out, and of course in a circle. So it takes an immense amount of skill when you're painting up close to make sure it doesn't look weird when it bulges out and is in a circle. So the building, of course, has been redone. I haven't been down there yet. I've talked to some people who have. It's pretty incredible, I guess. So it's one of the places I need to get to. So this is 2015. So the new building and the restoration of the cyclorama cost $36 million. Oh, and the painting at the top, it shows you what it looks like when it's put flat. So that's what I'm talking about, the skill it takes to paint it so that it looks normal when it's round and bowed. Because when you're there looking at it, it doesn't look like what it looks like up there, of course. Thank you very much. I have a little booklet on Custer. I didn't even talk about this one, cyclorama. And then, of course, I have a book up here on the Gettysburg Cyclorama. So if anybody just wants to take a quick look at these before lunch, I'll just have them right here. Thank you. Any questions? We got like one or two. I'm sorry. Go ahead. 25 cents and 50 cents. And they were making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And 50 cents, you can imagine the number of people. I mean, they were talking about crowds of 500,000 people going through these things in a year. And that's, you know, a lot.
Dave, are there still like a couple of these around in North America?
Yeah. Kind of, if I was going farther in my talk, I talk about some of these. There's supposedly a Gettysburg Cyclorama out there that's in storage. I think Jerusalem at the time of the crucifixion of Christ is still out there, but not open. It was up in Canada, and I don't think you can go see it anymore, but it's still there. So very few of these dozens of paintings exist. They were 400 feet long, 40 foot tall, weighed a couple tons. So it's not hard, it's not easy to store them, get them around. Most of them were cut to pieces and sold in pieces. Thank you.
And watch for Dave's book on the subject in 3-4 years. Is that enough time? 2 years? Great story. We will make an effort to see that cyclorama if in Atlanta, if the bus tour does go ahead this fall. The Atlanta History Center is on the list of places we'll visit, and no doubt the cyclorama will be part of it. From 12 noon to 1 o'clock, we have lunch period. The red dot on your name tag is a signal to the people bringing out the plates that they should put a plate in front of you. We still have a few meals left. We don't have meals. We have 1 meal left. So the first person to run back with money for Carol can get a meal. Otherwise, at 1 o'clock sharp, we will start our next presentation. Thank you.